crowd, what a crowd. You know, it's funny, Sue, I had a conversation with, after my panel yesterday, I was having a chat with the audience, and someone asked me a question. They said, you haven't talked at all about emotions and mindset. We're talking about the future of longevity. And I said to her, you have to go on my Instagram and see the sort of content that I talk about, because it's all about mindset.
Absolutely.
So I'm so happy right now we're talking about not just mindset, but I believe the most important part of mindset as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm so glad that we got to connect, and thank you all for being here.
What a pleasure. Practical optimism, the art, science, and practice of exceptional well-being. Sue, why do you do what you do?
Oh man, I don't even know where to start, but you know, one thing I've learned as a psychiatrist practicing for over 20 years is that if you don't take care of your wellness in a deliberate and intentional way, it will become your illness. And what I mean by that is most people don't end up seeing a psychiatrist for at least 5 or 10 years. So they're suffering either in silence, they never see a doctor, or they're going from doctor to doctor, neurologist, because they have headaches, they have insomnia, because they have gut problems, they are having bladder problems, they're having chest palpitations, they end up in the emergency room. So to me, all of this feels so wasted, not to mention economic cost, right? We know that in the United States, people spend $400 billion as a country on depression alone because they're showing up to work, and it's something called presenteeism, where you're showing up to work but you're not really productive, or absenteeism, where you're going to work, you're either not showing up or you're showing up and you're not productive. Presenteeism is the showing up but not productive. And the problem is that so much of this, in my mind, can be prevented. And as a psychiatrist, unfortunately, I don't see people until literally the other shoe has dropped. Things have to get bad. There's trauma, there's loss, there's guilt. That goes on for years, and it manifests in the form of physical symptoms. And I learned from my own experience, and I talk about this in the book, is that the body expresses what the mind cannot. And we end up harboring tension and, like I said, insomnia, gut problems, headaches, anxiety, depression. And I wanted to find a sort of one-stop approach that combines or bridges illness and wellness. Because I realized, like, doctors, we're not trained in wellness. Like, you're only trained in sick care, not health care. And I said, I really want to invest in prevention. And when I was working with 9/11 survivors, I was the medical director of the first program at NYU. I learned a lot about resilience. And resilience is fascinating, important, phenomenal. But resilience is about bouncing back from adversity. And I wanted to help people thrive in the face of it. So while resilience is about bouncing back, to me, optimism is about flourishing forward.
I love that. Love that saying.
Thank you.
The body keeps the score,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And this whole idea of cause and effect, the fact that we're so obsessed currently as a healthcare system of looking at the end result. This person is sick, this person is stressed, and actually getting back to where it all started. It's so important.
Yes, yes.
How does one know if they're an optimist or a pessimist? Maybe we should ask the audience.
Yeah.
How many optimists do we have here right now? I love it.
Wow.
Yes. This is why you're at the Copenhagen Health Week. Any pessimists? Okay.
There's no right or wrong answer. We love you just the same.
They might be wrong, though, actually.
Yes,
So I'd love to know, how does someone know if they're a pessimist or an optimist? How is that defined? And how can someone tell if they're actually wrong in their decision on that?
Okay, great question. So before I answer what is the definition of optimism, I'm just going to ask with a show of hands. Imagine you're driving a car and you're going to a shopping mall and you have to look for a parking spot. Where do you tend to park? Will you park 3 blocks away because you'll say to yourself, there's no parking spot, I better take this one here because nothing will be available and I don't want to circle for 2 hours? Or do you drive right up to the store and hope that there's one spot waiting just for you? So if you're the type that will go right up to the store, raise your hand. Wow.
Got some nods over there, big smile.
And if you're the type that will park 3 blocks away, that's me. Where are you guys at? Okay, great. So, it's a very rough test, and of course, there's no such thing as the parking optimism test, but generally speaking, there's this idea that if you think that good things are generally possible, that you expect positive outcomes, that is the definition of optimism, that there's a genetic, natural tendency to see the glass as half full as opposed to half empty. And believe it or not, there is a genetic component to it, right? I didn't realize this until research came out in 2011, and there were researchers at the UCLA University, and they found that there is a gene, and it's called the oxytocin receptor gene. Now, we've all heard of oxytocin, the cuddle and bonding hormone. It's released during orgasm. It's between mother and child, friends. And this hormone, if you have this gene in this sequence, you're more likely to be born optimistic. But the reality is that only 25% of us are born this way. The 75% of us, the rest of us, and I count myself in that, we're not, and we have to work at it. And the research found is that even if you're not born with this gene sequence, you can learn, because really what the gene codes for is social skills, interpersonal skills, emotional regulation skills. And I'm like, if that is something that can be learned, it can be taught, and I'm already kind of doing this with my patients, but again, most people, 90% of the population, will never make it into my office. I'll never meet them. So how do we create an approach that is free, that is accessible to everybody, and that can be given to people very early on? So almost like I would say grade school, high school. These are coping skills for life. So I don't think of practical optimism as anything but a life philosophy and sort of like a manual on how to see the world, how to relate to people in a positive way, because we know that there's a lot of benefits, head to toe, of optimism, health benefits.
The pessimists again? Apparently you live 15% less than the optimists, so you might want to hear a bit more about Sue's practical approach.
And that's very true, that they live shorter lives, so optimists tend to live 10 to 15% longer, what they have exceptional longevity, which is not just living longer, right? We don't want lifespan necessarily without health span, which is living longer but in good health. So we want the health span. Optimists have 30 to 40% less depression, less anxiety, 30 to 40% less strokes. And get this, they're 40% more likely to get a raise in the next year. 5 times less likely to have burnout at work, 6 times more likely to be engaged in the work they do. So, we've always dismissed optimism. Oh no, it's toxic positivity. Oh no, you're just born with it. Oh no, it's too woo-woo. But then as a physician, if I need to wrap my head around something and suggest it to someone, I need to see the data. And there is so much data across fields in medicine, not just neuroscience, but in surgery. People who get surgeries are able to have wound healing faster. Your immune system is boosted, more cytokines, so you get less colds and infections. So it's like the list is endless in every aspect of your life. You're more likely to have childhood friendships that last forever. You're more likely to wear seat belts, so less likely to smoke, more likely to exercise. So if you ask me what is one-stop approach to longevity, it really starts in the mind, as you said.
I'm sure everyone's just thinking, how? I want it all.
Give it to me, put it in a pill.
But a few questions beforehand.
Yes.
Is there a problem with being too much of an optimist?
Oh my God, right. So here I am telling you all the benefits of optimism, and then I'm also going to take a crap on it and say, yes, there is. There's the extreme side of optimism, which is blind optimism. And blind optimism, how many of you have heard of the ostrich effect? Right? So the ostrich effect is where you're burying your head in the sand and you just expect your problems to go away. And I'll give you a practical example of that. So imagine a doctor tells them, I'm seeing something a little high with your cholesterol. I think you might be borderline diabetic. I'm not quite sure. Why don't you come back for a test? Why don't we follow up on this in 3 months? The blind optimist will say, nah, doc, you worry too much. It'll be fine. I'm fine. You're projecting your own pessimism. I'll be okay. And then they don't go to the follow-up, right? Meanwhile, things are brewing. Their health might be getting worse. And what's so interesting is that while blind optimism causes you to bury your head in the sand, engage in denial, you don't follow through. On the other hand, the extreme pessimist is also doing the same thing, but for different reasons. The extreme pessimist says, I'm not going to follow through because I'm so scared. And I have a lot of patients with health anxiety. They say, I don't want to find out what the mammogram might say. I'll be honest with you. We have guidelines of when we're supposed to get colonoscopies and mammograms, and it took me like almost a year each time to get. And I'm a doctor, and I'm delaying my own basic health care because I'm like, oh my God, what's going to happen? So I have to then remind myself, okay, practical optimism, which is a lot of times when we have health anxiety or anxiety for any reason, we have a tendency to overestimate the danger, the problems, and underestimate our ability to handle it.
Yeah.
Right? So we make the problem worse, and we don't realize that we actually have the capacity or resources to deal with it, or at least have the ability to find out who can help us.
So interesting. When I think about the denial hyper-optimist, I'm hearing fear. When I think of the ultra-pessimist, I'm hearing fear.
Yes.
And then I'm also hearing a lack of self-trust as well in that process as well.
Yeah. You know, Julian, you're the first person to ever say that what you said about fear with the extreme optimist, and maybe that is our defense mechanism. So think of the optimist, extreme optimist who says, I'm fine, I'm tough, and maybe really it is fear that they're suppressing, right? Or that in some way they're acting as if they can handle it because they don't want to deal with these challenging emotions. So they maybe have a little more in common than we think, the extremes of both ends. And that's why we want to have something more in the middle, marrying a little bit of healthy skepticism, healthy pessimism with optimism, because that's really important. We don't want, like the believe it or not, the pessimists out there, you do your due diligence, you do your homework, which is really key. But the problem is pessimists become mired in negativity, they become passive as a result, and they don't act, then the problems get worse.
I've got a friend who is always that sort of, everything is absolutely fine, and the big smiles and everything, and there's just something just uneasy about the relationship at times.
So
I don't know if that's the person we're talking about.
And like, so the idea of like toxic positivity is like, rah, rah, everything will be fine. And I think we're kind of guilty of that in the United States, and I think a lot of people from Europe will say when they go to America that there's a lot of superficial pleasantries, bro, what's going on, it's all good, like, right, like pretending like life is great, and like that may not be your default setting. And I do believe that telling someone, just get over the problem, right? Just look on the bright side, without really understanding the magnitude of what they have been through, the gravity, you don't know them, you don't know their circumstance. And even in the best of intentions, if you do know them, right, you're minimizing, you're not allowing that person to feel validated, right? So before you have a platitude of life is good, and you may think so. Like my dad is always very cheerful and optimistic, and I talk about him in the book, and he's a retired psychiatrist, and how much influence he had on me as growing up, on this work that I do. And I know that he's coming from a good place, but when I'm really down, all I really want is someone to just sit and listen, right? Like, I will figure it out eventually. I don't necessarily want solutions. And I don't want someone to just be like, it'll be fine, let's move on. Because we need to sit with our emotions. That's a really important part of practical optimism, is acknowledging your emotions, sitting with them, giving them respect, and then in due time, following a realistic, logical, practical course to your solution.
I think that nicely brings us to practical optimism.
It's just hair.
So
It's making a lot of noise.
thank you.
See if we can fix it a little bit.
Yes. We can move the hair back if need be. Yeah.
Brilliant. That brings us on to practical optimism.
Yes.
Give us the tools to become proper optimists.
Yes. So while optimism, and I just talked about all its benefits, right, from head to toe, at the end of the day, as important as optimism is, it really is only a mindset, right? And it's a mindset that you're either born with or you're not. And there are plenty of people who are natural born optimists who in the midst of trauma and struggle lose that optimism. And they may come to me and say, well, I want to be that optimistic person again, help me. And I say, okay, optimism was what nature gave you, right? But practical optimism is more than just a positive mindset. It is a skill set, it is a tool set, and it is an action set that helps you translate positive outlooks into positive outcomes through action, right? And I say that optimists are born, but practical optimists are made. And so there are 8 pillars of practical optimism. And the first one, we're not going to be able to get into all of them, but the first pillar is having a sense of purpose in life, right? So how many of you feel like you wake up, jumping out of bed, and you feel like I have a strong sense of purpose? I have my why, I understand what I'm doing today. Would you say? Yeah. Great. And I would say that even if you don't have always, every day, a strong sense of purpose in life, like I call that capital P, big P, you may have a purpose in your day. Your purpose could be small p, as to why am I here today? Why am I here at this meeting? Who do I want to meet? What do I want to get out of it? And I always say that your purpose doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be grand. No one else in the world needs to understand your purpose. And your purpose yesterday may not be the same as your purpose today. And your purpose today may not be the same as your purpose tomorrow. Our purpose is always evolving, just the way we are. And for those of you who did not raise your hand that you have a strong sense of purpose, I would say that that's okay. But I do think that it is your job, if you can't find purpose, it's your job to create it. And what I mean by that is put the cart before the horse. So populate your calendar with things that give you pleasure, meaning, and joy. And for me, being here today is one of those things, to speak about something that I'm passionate about. It's my first time in Copenhagen, so to be in a new city, to meet amazing people like you, Julian, Tina, everybody here. So I feel like sometimes we don't always wake up excited, rah-rah, knowing purpose, but it's okay, one step at a time, put one foot in front of the other. And sometimes I also say, being a psychiatrist, that, working with people with depression, when you're feeling depressed, low mood for days on end, get help. Even one session of therapy can be so helpful, because a lot of times our sense of purpose in life can feel obscured when our mood is low. It's not that we've lost our purpose, it's just it's hard to see it. It feels very hazy because you're not feeling a sense of motivation. So I can tell you that as someone who has worked with people in depression, one of the things that we do, and what's so interesting to me about the work of optimism and practical optimism, is that it can be used in conjunction with therapy. So not only is it preventative, it can be worked as part of maintenance, and it can be an adjunct. It's not going to replace your therapy and your therapist, the individualized care, but it can certainly be a tool next to it. And helping people create a sense of meaning, agency, that I matter in this world, I have a sense of belonging, because we become depressed because we feel as if we don't matter. And that is a slippery slope, because a lot of people that I've worked with who are recovering from very severe depression, even suicide, they feel like they're a burden. They feel like they don't matter. They feel like they cannot make contribution. And I believe strongly that each one of us has a very unique skill set and talent set, and it is our job to find it.
So interesting. Could you quickly just go through the 8?
Okay.
Just so we have them in our minds, and then we'll see how much time we have to explore them.
So the purpose is the first one, and practicing healthy habits is the last one, right? And there are 8 of them. And I use basically purpose as intention, as vision of what do you want to achieve in this moment, in this life. And practicing healthy habits is the execution of it, right? And it could be actual physical habits, because optimists live longer, partly because they, as I said, don't smoke, exercise, wear seatbelts, and they practice good mental health habits. But when you take any vision starting from purpose, there are going to be obstacles in life. And then the 6 pillars in between are navigating through those obstacles. So the next one is processing your emotions. And I give people a 4-step easy plan that anytime anything is bothering you, get very granular. What is bothering you, right? And I call it name it, tame it, claim it, and reframe it. Name the antecedent. Claim where in your body are you feeling it. And of course, I'm going very, very quickly because it's 20 years of research and science that are going to be, in half an hour. So I do hope that you get to read and listen and learn more, but on your own time. But
can you give us like an example of an emotion that you're trying to process? Let's say I've woken up and I'm feeling absolutely crap. I've got to go on stage, and now I'm pissed off. My girlfriend, I don't have a girlfriend, but she's elbowed me, and I've only had 4 hours sleep.
Yes, okay, great. Perfect example. So the fact that you were able to label the antecedent and know where it comes from, that is such a sign of good mental health. You're already 50% of the way there, right? Because believe it or not, it may sound so simple. Most of us don't know, because we're carrying so much residue from the day that 10 things have happened that by the end of the day, you're like, I don't even know why I'm mad. I'm mad at the whole world. I'm mad at my boss. I'm mad at my wife, my dogs, my kids, the stupid people on the road who don't drive and don't have any respect for other people. So the fact that you're able to label it specifically, I haven't slept and my partner is pissing me off. So that's great. Then I would say claim it. Where in the body are you holding your tension, right? So if I were to ask you right now, where are you feeling like?
In my shoulders,
yes.
big time. Oh, and the upper back as well.
Yes. So just want everyone to just settle in your chair real quick, right? Maybe we can do a quick exercise and just settle, let your shoulders down. And one really important part of naming, claiming, taming is figuring out a problem. So if all of you are coming from somewhere today, right, and I want you to just close your eyes if you feel comfortable, let your shoulders drop, and ask yourself, what is on my mind today, right? If I'm carrying something, maybe it's from a day ago, maybe it's from a week ago, maybe it's a problem that I've left behind me at home, what is the problem? And where in the body am I feeling this, right? I want you to feel it are you feeling it in your throat? Are you feeling tightness in your shoulders? Are you feeling it in your clenched fists? Are you feeling it in your hips, right? So take a deep breath and count to 5, inhaling through the nose, gently to the count of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, inhaling, and exhaling slowly through your mouth also to the count of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. and just let it go. And I want to ask you that, keeping your eyes closed, if you have clearly identified the problem, now I want to ask you, where do you think the solution to this lies, right? And I want you to imagine the actual solution to the problem. So let's say it was somebody that made you upset, and you're imagining a conversation with them. I mean, fill in the blank with whatever is on your mind right now. And I want you to actually imagine vividly where this solution is. Give it a place, right? Give it a little home, give it a little cabinet, give it a little closet, but visualize the solution, because there actually is a solution to the problem. And allowing yourself to visualize it as highly concrete allows you to develop a pathway to that problem as being realistic, as being practical, as being possible. And I want you to envision the road to the problem. Is it winding? Is it straight? Does it twist or turn? And as you get closer to the solution, feel the feelings of positivity, of a sense of mastery, of a sense of control that come with you being able to find this solution, right? So you have named it, you have claimed where in the body. Here we used a visualization exercise. It's called best possible scenario, where things work out, right? That's how we're taming it, but you could do a 1-minute meditation, and then reframing it. So I am capable of figuring out my problems. My problems are not bigger than me. So just take a deep breath, inhaling through the nose, and bring yourself back to the room and recognize how powerful it is, that positive imagery of you finding a solution to your problems. And I want you to be able to tap in and come back to this feeling of mastery. I mean, we rush through it really quickly, but it is a science-based 10-minute, it's called best possible intervention, where you close your eyes, you envision a solution, you do deep breathing, you relax, and then you remember what that state feels like, and you come back to it.
What I was feeling just then was gratitude and loving kindness. It was,
that's beautiful.
Coming back to self, so
That's
thank you for
beautiful.
that. And so the final point is healthy habits.
Yes.
You've got 4 M's for them.
Yes.
You've got meaningful engagement, mastery, mindfulness, and
Yes.
movement.
Yes.
Wow, those
So
are big.
yes, and if I say you take nothing from this, like in the height of the pandemic, Global Citizen had called me and said, you know, we're having this big one night at home, everybody's home, and there are going to be a lot of fancy people performing, Elton John and Rolling Stone, and, you know, we'd like for you to participate. And at first I didn't understand. I said, I don't sing or dance. What am I supposed to do? They're like, no, we want you to give a message of hope and inspiration and concrete tools. And I'm like, what, do I have an hour? And they're like, no, you have 59 seconds. And I was like, 59 seconds? What am I going to impart that's going to be so hopeful and so powerful? And then I thought to myself, what do I do every day if I have to sometimes even write as a prescription, fake prescription to my patients? What are the habits that I do? What do I do? What did I learn from my dad, retired psychiatrist, who's really shown me the way to optimism and exceptional longevity? You know, he's like 90, but looks like he's 20 years younger. What have I learned from my patients of all of this work? And I came with these 4 M's of mental health that I could relay. You can relay to somebody in 59 seconds. And it's movement in any way possible, right? Like, and I think you get so much of that here in this beautiful city with everyone is cycling and walking, in the good weather at least, but in not so great weather, keep the weights by your bed. 2 30-minute sessions of weightlifting, weight training, even 3, walking, any kind of movement that you can, but make it a regular, even exercise, snacking 10 or 15 minutes. But yoga, Pilates, whatever it is you do, but it is non-negotiable, the movement, right? The mindfulness is just this, the deep breathing, centering yourself, even 1-minute meditations per day. Meaningful engagement is my favorite by far. One of the pillars in this book is called people. And it was my absolute favorite because I love working with people. I love talking to people, learning from them. Meaningful engagement is about going deep. It is about being vulnerable. It is about sharing. I believe in micro connections, like the small chit-chat, water cooler conversation, but also we need to be able to blend that with deep and meaningful conversations where you can share and you show up for another person on a, I would say, emotional level, on a spiritual level, however you will. And the last one is mastery. And you don't have to be a master to experience mastery. And that's so important, but it helps you put you in the flow state. And in the flow state, it's this unique situation where norepinephrine is increasing, dopamine is increasing, and it is this highly focused state where the default mode network quiets down. This is the part of the brain that is only active in the background with rumination when negative things are happening, and it is not task positive. When you focus on a task, and it could be pottery, it could be gardening, it could be golfing, it could be getting better at yoga, whatever it is that you're doing, a skill, it is challenging enough to really get the norepinephrine going, but not so much so that you start to feel anxious, because then the noradrenaline is too much. It puts you into fight or flight. but just enough that it's peak concentration between boredom and frustration. Too easy, it's boredom. Too hard, it's going to be frustration. So it's kind of like this inverted U-shaped curve, challenging enough so that the inverted U, if you imagine, is at that peak, where it's challenging enough to provide enough pleasure and stimulation.
Amazing. And I think for anyone in the room right now, the idea that you started this journey working with survivors of 9/11.
Yes.
And so that if they can do this,
Right.
anyone can do it,
Yes,
right?
yes. That's exactly the point, because I looked at people who were living in the most of extreme circumstances, and I say, what can we take this? Because not everyone will experience the big T of trauma, life-threatening event once in a lifetime, I hope. But most of us will experience the small daily hassles, the small T, right? The grievances, the annoyance, the job loss, the breakup. How do I take what I can learn from people who have not only survived, but thrived, right? Not only bounced back from adversity, right? But have thrived in the face of it. So optimism is about flourishing forward. So I really do hope that you think of this as a practice. Some days it's a 5-minute practice. It's like learning a skill, language, learning how to ride a bike, a sport.
If there's anyone in the room that has a family member, a friend, or themselves that is like really stuck in this victim mindset, like, no, Sue, it's just not going to work on me.
Yes, yes.
What would you recommend for them?
I would say the only thing you need is the belief and the small possibility that things can get better, right? Because that's all that optimism is. It is having positive outcome expectations, right? And anyone can develop positive outcome expectations. If you say to yourself, it will be good, right? And I'm not saying to be the blind optimist that buries your head in the sand and be like, oh, everything will work itself out. No. I've got that skepticism that's always naturally in me that will say, well, how exactly, you know, if I have kids and if one of them said, oh, Mom, I'm going to get 100 on the test, I'd be like, first of all, good for you. I love that. I love that positive energy and I love that positivity, right? But eventually I'm going to wait to hear, is there any follow through? Is there any studying going on, right? So just think about how you would work with a child who's like, I'm going to do great. And you're like, okay, but do you need to study? You want to maybe crack open a book or something, right? So don't forget that it's called practical optimism for a reason, right? It is not, you know, sunny skies, positivity, and unicorns, and life will be great. If there is a positive outcome expectation, it's because you translated those outlooks, positive outlooks, into positive outcomes through actionable steps. And there's a chapter on problem solving. That's one of the 8 pillars, which is, I give people 25-question punch list, and it'll be out in the New York Times. I was interviewed for it recently about, okay, for example, if money wasn't a problem, how would you treat this problem differently? If you had support, what would you do? Who would you ask for support? Who are your mentors? And there's also a pillar called proficiency, which is about really tapping into self-efficacy, this idea that confidence sometimes begets success, confidence in your abilities and not necessarily your abilities. You do need abilities. You need to be capable, but you also need to have the confidence plus capability to get stuff done.
So interesting. I'm loving this, by the way.
Thank you.
If I were to look into your crystal ball,
yeah.
I don't know how many of you are optimistic about the future, but what does the world look like to you by 2030 from an optimistic standpoint? Are you bullish? Are you pessimist?
I think in some ways things are going really right, and I feel like the pendulum will swing back in some ways. Like, I think I love all of the drive for data, for machine learning, AI, where everybody will have access. Like, there's a democratization in some ways of information, and technology is going to make things like with all these wearable devices. I'm seeing somebody with a chip being implanted and having access to information. So super cool, but I think we can never lose our humanity and our humility, and also this idea that there is an interconnectedness, right? If that gets lost, then we are screwed, right? That we do have a sense of responsibility to community, to one another. My fear is that we have become very hyper-independent, and as long as we allow ourselves to recognize that we do owe something to one another, right? The kindness, the sense of social responsibility that I'm seeing, at least in the United States, kind of getting eroded. There's political divisiveness. So I do think that there will be a backlash where people will say, nope, yes, it's great that we have technology, but we have to come back and we have to create, like, just as a very simple example, we have to create third spaces. Like, you have so much of that here, but like in the United States, there's a loneliness crisis. People feel like they're losing connection to family and to friendships. So to create spaces, to plan parks, like, it's very, practical optimism really is very global, holistic thinking. It's about how do you plan a city, for example, right? It may sound like this topic is about mental health, but it's really about something much broader. It's about trying to change society as a whole and recognizing what is the science, using science about societies. We do better when we can walk places, right? Like everything is walkable. We don't have that. We're a big car culture. It was definitely a shock, culture shock for me to see this, but in a positive way.
Have you seen any brain scans, by the way, of
Yes.
people who have gone through the process and
Yes.
just what changes and at what rates as well?
So people who are pessimistic, the right side of their brain lights up and it's fear and it's very amygdala based and it's fight or flight, and just giving someone a 10-minute positivity intervention like the one that we did right now, that was a shorter form, you tend to see more left brain lighting up where you think larger possibilities and positivity and optimism and hope, right? And believe it or not, both sides of the brain are always going to be active, but the more you practice the positivity on the MRI, functional MRI scans, you'll see more left brain activity, and you can train that sort of hardwiring, neural connectivity. A pessimist who is willing to go through a program and stick to like a diet. It's like you can change your body composition, you can change your mental composition.
Amazing. And just one last question, maybe we can have one for the audience if we have time, just one. Are there any cultures or countries around the world that you think have incorporated naturally over many millennia the ideas of practical optimism better than others?
Oh, that's so beautiful. You know, I think of the blue zones, and I think that any part of the world in which people, like they're saying places in Japan and Costa Rica and Italy, Sardinia, like they're living till 100, they're practical optimists because they're basically saying like the tenet of people and the importance of community and being able to sit outside and ask your neighbors to be invested in one another. Like, yes, healthy habits are really key, but for me, that if you want to know what someone's life is going to be like at age 70, 80, take a snapshot of what their friendships and their relationships look like in their 30s and 40s. And this very interesting study out of Finland actually came out that said that our midlife is the most crucial period from 36 to 45, that if we can make changes in our diet, like 3 things, cutting down on alcohol, improving sleep, improving physical activity, that we increase our longevity and decrease morbidity and mortality. So all the bad habits and risky behavior that we had, usually those bad habits develop before the age of 30. So it's never too late. And even if you're past the age of 45 and 50, again, never too late. But think of this sweet spot, and I'm looking around and I think a lot of people fall into that category. This is the time to really double down on your health, mental health, get the help, get the personal trainer, get that friend group, runners group going on, get that book club going on. Any habit that you make now is really going to invest and change the course of your life.
Amen to that. Any questions before we wrap up for Sue? Any questions? Going once. Oh, we've got one more.
Thank you very much for the talk. It was extremely interesting. I just want to ask from the maybe doctor perspective, when do you know when to prescribe antidepressants, or like how to see it also in others, you know, in the friends? When is this moment when just theory is not enough and there needs to be some medication?
Yes. So that's a very important question, and I think because I do prescribe medication, and I know that not everybody is open to it, I look at medication as life-saving and life-changing, and it starts with having a very thorough assessment, and that means, you know, asking questions about the medical background, medical history, who in your family has depression, mental illness, and then going through your own personal history. Have you ever experienced symptoms of depression? And there's a checklist, and like there's online even, you know, a self-rating scale, like looking at your sleep, your energy level, your appetite, your low mood. And in psychiatry, in order to give someone a diagnosis of depression, they have to have 5 out of these 9 symptoms that I just mentioned, and it has to last 2 weeks or more, and it has to cause impairment in your functioning. So even though you have depression, doesn't mean that medication is the only solution, but I can tell you that in conjunction with talk therapy, if somebody says, I don't want to get out of bed, I don't want to live life anymore, right? To me, that's a red flag, and I'm going to give them options, and depending on the severity, depending on the social support, depending on the side effects, discussing all of this, and even getting lab work, and because medical illnesses like low thyroid, vitamin B12, history of depression, diabetes, hypertension, mind and body are connected. So getting a very thorough assessment from a behavioral healthcare provider and going over lifestyle interventions, therapy, it's a very big holistic picture, but that if I had to give it in the most simplest form, of course I'm simplifying it, that's what I would say.
Just before we round up, I know there's a lot of talks going on, a lot of different little things being sold, but personally, I think Sue's work is the most important thing out here. I think if you can make those changes with your mindset, especially when it comes to optimism, the abundance of opportunity, not just for yourself, but the people around you, is just endless. So this is not me plugging the book, but please do check her book out,
you.
Practical Optimism, The Art, Science, and Practice of Exceptional Wellbeing by Sue Varma. Please all give Sue a massive round of applause.
Thank you.